Thank you so much, Efsoon, for the introduction. Welcome to the joint keynote session, Courageous Conversations in Racial Justice with Jared Adams. And this is a joint program with the National Conference of Bar Presidents and the National Association of Bar Executives. And Jared, before we go into our Q&A and our questions about your life story, let me ask you this. What do you like to do when you're not a lawyer, when you're not practicing law for fun?
I mean, I like to eat. I really do. So this quarantine hasn't been the best for me because it's given me the opportunity to do nothing but come up with recipes and eat. So I need to get on a treadmill and start burning some calories right now.
Well, you look fit to me, so you must not be eating enough.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you so much, Jared, for being our keynote speaker. Let me ask you the first question in this one. You have an incredible story, very impressive story. Tell us about your background, your childhood, and your wrongful conviction as you went through the process.
Yes. Well, look, let me thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a platform to be able to share my story in the work that I'm doing. So I put a lot of thought into this today, and I realized that this is the first virtual recording. So I just did not want to come on and bore anyone. So what I've decided to do is to tell my story with the help of illustrations and pictures. Okay. So I am going to share my screen right now and start by breaking down exactly my story from beginning to end. And let me know if you can see everything on your end.
Perfect.
All right. So my story began as a 17-year-old. I was graduating high school. That's me. I'm looking up at my mom as she screams loudly. That's my baby. And 2 months after that, instead of getting ready to enroll in college, 2 months after that, I was here. I decided to attend a college party with two of my friends. We would oftentimes go and do different parties out in different neighborhoods just because our neighborhood on the south side of Chicago was just so rough. We weren't kids who were in the streets. I've often marveled at those stories of people turning their life around, but that just wasn't our story. All three of us had graduated high school, was looking towards starting college, and decided to go and attend a party in the state of Wisconsin. We all used the classic alibi that I'm sure everyone has used before. My friends told their parents they were spending the night over my house, and I told my parents I was spending the night over their house. We drove about 2 hours to a college party in Wisconsin. We were at a party and we were partaking in everything at a college party that is there to offer. And we were ultimately falsely accused and wrongfully convicted of a sexual assault charge that quite frankly never happened. I had never had any experience at all with the law at that time. And so my mother, just being a single mother, we rested our faith in the hands of a court-appointed attorney. I know there are a lot of attorneys right now who are looking at this and watching this, so you can just imagine what we were up against, and very little resources. A lot of that had to do with the outcome in the case. I ended up being found guilty and sentenced to serve 28 years in prison with, again, a case that only introduced by way of evidence an accusation against myself and my two co-defendants. I ended up going to prison 17, turning 18, and I was 19 years old when I made my way inside of a maximum security prison. This picture, and the reason why I'm using this picture is because it's one thing for me to tell you, hey, I was a kid. But when you actually can see it, you'll get the opportunity to see just how young I was and the growth at the end of my journey, as I explained going forward, where I ultimately ended up, which is here before you guys and doing this presentation. I was in prison, and quite frankly, I didn't have the will or the knowledge to fight anymore while being inside of there. It was a violent incident that took place inside of the prison one day where someone was attacked, and it forced me and my cellmate to get to know each other. And it was the beginning of what I would call my legal career. While on lockdown inside of a maximum security prison, my cellmate was an older white gentleman who did a lot of studying of the law to pass his time. I had so happened to have a phone call with my parents on a day that we were locked down, and I was explaining to my mother that, you know, I just didn't know exactly, you know, what was going on. I didn't know the law. I just knew that, you know, we were innocent, didn't do it, and that was the only thing that I could project. But I didn't realize that that wasn't enough in the court of law. So as I proceeded to get off of the phone call, my cellmate said, "Listen, let me talk to you if you don't mind." And I said, "Okay, what's going on?" He says, "Listen, you know, I overheard your phone conversation, but I'm a bit confused because, you know, I hear you saying that you're innocent and that you don't know why you're here, but each and every day you get up and you go play basketball, you go play chess. You don't act like you're innocent." And so my response was, "Well, I have an attorney who's doing my appeal, and I'm trusting in that." And his response to me was, "Well, you had an attorney at your trial, and you trusting in that." And then to that, I said, "Touche." He began to go over my paperwork, and he gave me the case called Strickland versus Washington. Strickland versus Washington was a Supreme Court case in which an attorney was found to be ineffective for failing to investigate. I started to investigate my own case. I got the attention of the Wisconsin Innocence Project, and the Wisconsin Innocence Project argued my case all the way up to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, where the Seventh Circuit unanimously overturned my conviction. My conviction was overturned and I was released, but the damage was still done. I went in 1998, 1999, and I did not come home until 2006 and turning 2007, actually, the beginning of 2007. So where I went in as a 17, 18-year-old, I came home 26 years old, turning 27 that very year. The damage was done. I mean, so much of life had passed me by. I got out and looking for things that I saw on my way in almost a decade ago, and they weren't there. To give an illustration of that, there were no payphones. In 1998, 1999, if you were fortunate enough to have a cell phone, the cell phone was as long as your arm and the antenna was just as long as your leg, if you guys can remember that. So there was a lot of catching up that I had to do. I was fortunately able to do so with the help of many different people in the legal community in Chicago. Judge Ann Claire Williams, who allowed me to clerk in her courtroom. Mike Monaco took me under his wing and provided me with the tutelage and the mentoring to help me navigate how to get prepared to even apply for law school. So it was the entire community, legal community of Chicago that helped me get to this day. This day, I'm looking again just 10 years later at the same woman who was hollering 10 years ago, "That's my baby," as she's now hollering, "That's my baby," as I'm graduating from Loyola Law School. After graduating from law school, I had the opportunity to do a fellowship inside of Ann Claire Williams' courtroom. This was the very same circuit that overturned my conviction in 2006, which ordered my release in 2007. After, you know, doing the clerkship inside of the fellowship inside of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, I realized just how instrumental the Seventh Circuit was in my life. When I look back applying to be admitted to the New York bar, which I ultimately went to take the bar in New York and get admitted so I can take my job as an attorney with the Innocence Project in New York, I realized that back in 2006, when I was applying to the Seventh Circuit for a certificate of appealability, it was none other than Judge Williams who signed that certificate of appealability. I had no clue until after I did the fellowship with her that she signed a certificate of appealability in 2006 that allowed me to be heard in the Seventh Circuit. And then I thought even deeper just how important the Seventh Circuit was. Because not only did I get the opportunity to learn and to get the opportunity to see some of the best litigators in the city of Chicago and in the Seventh Circuit itself, but it also gave me the opportunity to meet the love of my life. I was actually married in the chambers of the Seventh Circuit, and I met my wife through Judge Williams, who she also mentored, Joy. After getting married, passing a New York bar, I then went on to work for the Innocence Project in New York. And working with the Innocence Project, one of my first cases was with a guy named Richard Baranek. Richard Baranek was a guy who I actually came across while incarcerated in Wisconsin. While working with the Innocence Project in New York, the Innocence Project is broke up and different lawyers have different states who are assigned. Richard Baranek was a case that the Innocence Project in New York had, and we were able to co-counsel with the Innocence Project in Wisconsin. So Mr. Baranek had been in prison for close to 30 years based on faulty DNA evidence that we would later test that would 99.99% prove that Mr. Baranek was innocent of the rape in which he was convicted. I had the pleasure of not just representing Mr. Baranek, but I also had the pleasure of doing so with this gentleman here. This is Keith Finley. Keith Finley is the director of the Wisconsin Innocence Project. And he was the guy who in 2006 argued my case in front of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, which led to my release in 2007.
Barrett, that is an amazing, amazing story. And the people that you've mentioned, do you still keep in touch with them?
Absolutely. I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Monaco was in on this today watching or something, right? But absolutely, I keep in touch with Mike Monaco. There are a lot of people who will be on here who know me, because my opportunity to get to know Mike Monaco and to learn the value of networking, I ran across a lot of people. A lot of people gave me cards, and I made it a point to not just take cards, but to make contacts. And I sent emails to folks, and all the way working my way from undergrad to graduating from Loyola Law School, I continue to reach out to folks to get the support of folks, which is why I can tell you right now today that I'm not here because of luck. I'm here because of community support. And if we want to get past the current times that we're dealing with right now, I'm a living example of how community support can change things.
So the people that helped you, Jared, and you talked about them and the things that they did for you, can you tell us how your experience led you to where you are today and the things that you're doing now?
So there's no way for me to tell each and every detail of my case, in an hour. So I gave everyone the elevator pitch of my story and getting to where I am. But while incarcerated, I had the opportunity to meet people who were depicted as if they were born at the scene of their allegations. And when I got the opportunity to meet people, what I did was I became a tutor in the law library at prison in order to get access to the law library to work on my own case. And while I was tutoring these men, I realized that this isn't going to work. We aren't going to lock our way up to safety in this society. We aren't correcting anything inside of the Department of Corrections. We are warehousing people, and we are ill-equipping people upon release to do nothing more but to return back into prison. And I wanted to find a way to lend my voice and to develop a solution. And so I decided to dedicate my life to becoming the same folks who came to my rescue. And so I went to law school with the purpose, and I also was a recipient of the Chicago Bar Foundation Scholarship, the Abraham Lincoln Merit Scholarship, which is a scholarship designed to create a pipeline of attorneys who want to specialize in public interest. And so I took that to heart, and I dedicated my life to becoming an attorney. So that way I would have the platform and opportunity to tell people that if you think what I've been able to accomplish was impressive, let me impress upon you the importance of duplicating more Jared Adams, because that's the only way you'll stop what happened recently in Chicago of the looting and the rioting. That isn't a lock them up and throw away the key solution. That is an infrastructure solution that we all in the legal community owe responsibility to going in and fix.
So Jared, what did the prison system do to you? How did it affect your mental and physical health?
Well, I'll just say this. Every person who experiences prison is in a car wreck. Some people come out with back injuries, knee injuries, head injuries, and some people don't come out with any physical injuries at all. All of their injuries lie within. They might have post-traumatic stress from this, and they might not know exactly what it is because it's not been diagnosed. I luckily and thankfully had a support system of my mother and my aunts who did not make it an option for me in terms of mental health care. So I took therapy very seriously because I was angry. I was upset. I left at 17, turning 18, and I came back at the age of 26, turning 27, where all of my peers weren't in the clubs anymore. They were starting families, starting careers, and I felt so behind that I was in an endless chasing of years and time that I was never gonna ever get back. And I needed to accept that. I needed to accept that, but not forget that. And that is exactly what I did and was able to do with the help of therapy, to be able to compartmentalize my anger and channel it into the fuel that has driven me to where I am today.
So you're now heavily involved in working to free others who have been wrongfully incarcerated. Can you tell us a bit more about some of the current cases you are working on?
Yes. So I am working on, so what I'm doing right now is this. I specialize and I practice, in my area of focus is on actual claims of innocence. And what I am attempting to do with these cases is this. I'm attempting to show that our criminal justice system gets it wrong, and there are things that we can implement to fix it, right? And to introduce some slides into this so that people can understand exactly what I mean. I'll just show a couple slides. So in 2000, well, let me say this. In the 1990s, we had drug laws come into effect that directly, disproportionately affected the communities of color in all urban areas across the United States. What it did was create this prison boom. And when you have a prison boom like this, that now has 100,000 or a million folks go up to 2.3 million folks, you are creating a system that can't have checks and balances because it's so many people that are going through at one time. And so with this, we have to ask ourselves the question, how are we the greatest nation in the world and also the greatest incarcerator in the world, and what is behind it? So when you see a slide like this, understand that these numbers come from somewhere. So where do these numbers come from? if you look at the numbers of the slide that I just showed you, they are in direct correlation to privately funded prisons and other businesses associated with prison. Because of this, this has become a business, and it's not a model of corrective behavior and a focus on rehabilitating folks that are gonna be back into the community. Only, look, 90-something%, 95% almost of people who are incarcerated today will be back into our society. So what that means is we need to spend more time thinking about our criminal justice system, not from an angle of just incarceration, but on an angle of social justice and equality. And when I, in terms of answering your question more specifically, in the area of practice that I do, the causes of wrongful conviction are a multitude. But really what it comes down to is this. Usually the people who are wrongfully convicted have some of the same similar correlations. Lack of resources to afford proper representation, mental or physical disabilities that keep them from articulating themselves to their attorneys. And there are also issues within our prosecutors' offices and also our police departments, right? So all of these things are in this pie that we have of criminal justice. But what we do is, of the $2 billion annually, and it's a little bit more now, we spend 62% of that on incarcerating folks. We spend 2% on reentry, 3% on mental health, 3% on community programs, 4% on central administration. The things that we spend the least on are our solutions to fixing the problems that we have within our criminal justice system. Until we start spending more on those, we'll continue to have what we have. We had a war on drugs. It resulted in mass incarceration. Now we need to have a war on education, a war on duplicating more success stories, and a war on mentorship. And maybe we can have mass folks coming downtown to enroll in school and work in jobs and not looting in our society, especially in the city of Chicago where I was born and raised.
What can bars and bar leaders do to make an impact in social justice, Jared?
You know, I believe that this country was founded on litigation. I don't believe it, I know it to be true. And in our society, it is unfortunately set up that those who have the resources to litigate are the ones who are able to get relief in certain areas. And so African Americans, minorities of color, you rarely, if ever, see law firms who are big law firms and have the capacity to litigate. You rarely see those firms made up of people who come from these impoverished areas and communities. So what the bars can do and the bar associations can do is this. I've decided to come back to Chicago, and I'm opening up an office in Chicago. It would have already been open in Chicago had it not been for the virus and COVID-19. I'm going to open up an office in Chicago, and I'm also opening up a portion of that office designed to a nonprofit that I've started called Life After Justice. And what I plan to do is create a pipeline in the same spirit of the pipeline that was created to get me where I am today. So again, I told everyone that it was the Abraham Lincoln Maravich Public Interest Scholarship that gave me the financial support that I needed to get into the rooms with the Mike Monacos and the other folks that helped me along the way. So I believe that across the nation, not just in the city of Chicago, bar associations should make it their business to identify and find law students to get them not only through law school, but have a place for them to work with a fellowship with an emphasis on social justice. Specifically, I am talking about African American law students and law students of color who come from these areas of the impoverished neighborhoods. For the African Americans and kids of color who come from Harvard to get a job, that's cute, that's nice. But to have direct impact and change, you need to provide the resources to the people who are closely to the problems. Because the people who are closest to the problems have the solutions, but they're the furthest away from the resources. So each and every bar association should specifically fundraise each year for 1 to 2 students to put them through, and not just put them through financially, but mentor them. Or I cannot tell you, and Mike Monaco isn't paying me to say this, okay? But I can't tell you how important it was to have someone I could text and call, and not only just him, but he introduced me to his entire family. Both of his sons are attorney, and they too, Brian and Dan, would also help and mentor me along the way. I look, right now, the role models for our kids in these areas that are struggling the most are entertainers, whether it be rappers or whether it be professional ball players. And you know why? It's because that is what they see is the quickest way to get out of poverty. But I have news for folks. It is easier to go through what I went through and become what I've become than it is to be the #1 pick in a draft of any kind. It is easier to go through what I've went through to become a #1 selling rap artist. But if we don't give our kids the opportunities in these areas, the opportunities to grow and survive and thrive, we are setting ourselves up for the boil up that we are seeing right now across the country.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jared, with regards to mentoring and really spending time with, the Black community and the minority communities. I also want to let you know, I know Mike Monaco really well, so he's going to have to take us up both to dinner for the plug on that one. And welcome to Chicago. Proud that you're here in Chicago with us. So my next question to you, Jared, is how is today's current environment impacting your work?
So it's making me focus even more now on getting myself, my story, which I call my testimony, out, because what I see right now is just really a blanket of hopelessness that are seem to thrive in these communities. Hopelessness gives birth to hopeless acts. I think that for the longest time, we've tried to gloss over our country's history of inequality. And right now it's bubbling up. And, I understand this. I understand that for some people, it's hard to understand really the systematic injustice and inequality that we have. So I want to take this opportunity to use an analogy to help folks understand where we are right now. Imagine there being an Easter egg hunt, and a certain group is forbidden to participate in this Easter egg hunt simply because of who they are and how they look. For the entire time of this Easter egg hunt, the one group that is allowed to participate in this hunt, they're getting eggs, they're keeping eggs, they're passing eggs down in their families, so that way their families have these eggs, have this structure. And then finally, people realize that forbidding another group from participating in this egg hunt is just morally wrong. So they say, you know what? You're allowed to now participate in this egg hunt. So now that this group is allowed decades, centuries later to participate in this egg hunt, we should reasonably understand why it's so difficult for them to obtain eggs. Because we've had a head start for so many years and we've passed it down. Some people can't acknowledge the history They can only look at the present and say, well, what's the big deal? Well, why are you doing this? You can grab eggs just like we can. But that's not the damage. The damage was done back decades ago. And so we owe it to this society not to ignore what's going on and what happened in our society years ago. We owe it to our forefathers not to ignore it. We owe it to fix it. And the only way you fix it is with true equality. So if you are a partner of a firm and you cut off of this presentation and you go back and you go look at your roster and there is not a person of color from one of these impoverished communities sharing a partnership, there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with that. And if you have a problem finding a qualified candidate, then you need to groom a qualified candidate if you really care. If it's not your desire to care, then most certainly don't speak up about what's happening that boils over inside the communities and rioting and stuff like that. I know that this presentation is being seen by people who care. So I am asking all to explore different ideas and opportunities. If it's too difficult, too much time, I am going to show a link today to my nonprofit. You can find a fellow. I can find you a fellow, and we can make it work. We can make sure that we groom and start putting in the pipeline people who aren't going to simply come from impoverished areas, go to school downtown and go live on the north side, but they'll come from these impoverished areas, go to school down south, and go back to repair their impoverished areas.
Thanks for pointing that out, Jared, because yes, our viewers are the bar leaders and the bar executives who could really affect that, that change. In light of what we're going through right now with the pandemic, and Jared, we're not just going through one pandemic. We're going through the health pandemic, the social injustice pandemic, economic pandemic. I feel like people turn to lawyers as pillars of the community. In other words, lawyers have become more essential in the community. Do you think that's true? And if so, why?
It is true. I mean, look, what's the saying goes? A person who represents themselves has a fool for a client. There's a meaning behind that more than just a laugh. And what that means is usually people who are directly affected by inequality and injustice, it's too emotional for them to represent themselves. There are stories, there are cases of the few, but we need the legal community to step up and to continue to be litigious. We can't ask anymore for equality. We must demand it and litigate it and see it all the way through. There are certain things right now, specifically inside of these areas, that quite frankly, if they were in other areas, they would be litigated to extinction. I'll give you one. In the city of Chicago specifically, the lines of support for schools are drawn by the neighborhood that they're in. So it's very easy to see how a school in Inglewood would lack the resources to produce thought leaders and changers and people who could go and repair and revitalize those communities. So if you take that same issue and you place it in Winnetka, and let's say that the school district in Winnetka, for some reason, was designed to get support based off of something that we knew would end up with them with lack of support, there would be lawyers litigating that all the way to the highest court that they had to go to fix that. So you look at these communities inside of these impoverished areas, there's no resources for people to litigate that. There are no partners, no chairs of law firms to make that their mission, because it doesn't mean that they're necessarily prejudiced or racist. What it means is this: they've never, ever walked in those shoes. So it's hard to expect someone to have as much sympathy and empathy as those who deal with ducking bullets on the way to school in Inglewood and on the West Side. So we have to not shy away from our responsibilities as litigators, as truth seekers. And we have to start to put the pieces back together in our societies. And if you think about any movements that have happened in our society, it wasn't just the people who was affected by it. It was those who were tired of watching the people suffer who was affected by it that got the true change in our society.
What words of wisdom would you advise our viewers, both lawyers and bar executives, as they work through their year as president and as bar executives in these unprecedented times?
Well, the bit of advice that I would offer is this. We were blessed to get to this earth with 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? That wasn't a mistake by God and by our Creator. So I think that we should listen more and speak less, because if we do so, we'll know exactly what to say and what strategies to implement if we listen more. Listen to these communities that you're in. Don't just go home and watch it on the news and say, man, it's just so terrible. Actively get involved. Challenge the people who are around you to actively participate and get involved. If you are a bar president or executive watching right now, I want you to start this mentoring fellowship to get someone through, but I want you to go challenge someone else that you know will spend the amount it'll take to start a fellowship on a golf outing and tell them to match what you're doing. And if they can't do that, tell them don't have a conversation with you about what people are doing out on the streets in the effort and in the name of equality and justice.
So Jarrett, we are at the end of our interview, but is there anything else that you want to share to the group?
I do. I want to, so I was doing a speaking event at Duke Law School before our lives became shut down. And after sharing my story, a lady came up to me and she said, you know what? Your story encompasses this story I want to share with you. It's called Somebody, Everybody, Anybody, Nobody. And so she gave me this story, and I want to share it with everyone as we close today. This is a story about 4 people named Everybody, Somebody, Anybody, and Nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everyone's job, everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have. And what I take from that is very clear as to what it's saying. We all need to step up to the plate and not wait. And hopefully what you do will inspire others to follow what you do. Thank you all again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Jarrett, for sharing your personal story and thoughts on how we can have those courageous conversations all our bar associations need to have. If you want to reach out to Jarrett for more information, you can see his social media handles, and you can contact him through our event platform app. Just click on Meet the Speakers to send a message directly to Jarrett. Also be on the lookout for Jarrett's new book, Justice for Sale, A Wrongful Conviction. And by the way, Jarrett, I pre-ordered that already, so I expect that to be signed by you, right?
Absolutely. It's going to be signed at dinner on Mike Monaco.
There you go. That's right. You got that one. Justice for Sale, A Wrongful Conviction, A Broken System, and One Lawyer's Fight for the Truth, published by Penguin Books and coming soon wherever books are sold. But you can pre-order those books. For NCBP and joint attendees, our next program will start in 5 minutes. Leading in an era of disruptive change. Please click on the agenda to join this meeting. And now, here is a message from NABE President Terry Hill for NABE attendees. Thank you so much, Jarrett Adams.
Thank you.